Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is a very special one. His name is Hahn. He's a close friend of mine, and more than that, in fact, he's a family member that we'll talk a little bit about here in this episode. But Nick and I were lucky enough to spend some time traveling together recently in Greece after he just completed a test run of a move abroad with his partner and their 3 children. And as we were spending time together, I kept saying, I wish we had a microphone because what we're discussing is so relevant to the About Abroad audience. Some of the concerns that they have about moving abroad, the push-pull factors, the places that they're considering, the resources that they have at their disposal, all of this is very reminiscent of the types of conversations I'm having with many of you directly via email and other formats. So this was really fun because we kind of reflected back on our time together in Greece. We talked about some of the things that they're considering and some of the ways that they're going about planning this move abroad. And hopefully it will provide you all with some insights into how you could plan a move and or answer some of the questions that you might have. If nothing else, I hope it's entertaining and a lot of fun for you because it certainly was for me. Please help me in welcoming Nick Hahn to About Abroad. Yeah, so I used to do these episodes like early on when I started this podcast that I called About Abroad Happy Hours. And I kind of wish, I've always wanted to sort of bring it back. Like I was telling you, like I wish that I had a reason to, but sort of all the episodes just became About Abroad Happy Hours. So I stopped doing them. And so anyway, but I feel like this is like a legit happy hour here because we're legitimate, we're family, we're friends. We've just been hanging out in Greece together. And I was so stoked to get you on the show, man, and talk about some of the things that we've been jamming on for the last few weeks. So thanks for joining. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. Great to see you. And it definitely is a happy hour. It's always happy to chat with you. And, we don't have a beer, but we've both got coffee. So that works.
That'll work. That'll work. You readjusted to the time zone, getting back to the US now?
Yeah, it was great. It wasn't too hard. It's probably the easiest transition in cross-country, cross-world travel I've had yet. So it's been good. Nice.
Glad to hear it. Well, for a little bit of context for the audience, you and I know each other very well now, but the rest of the people listening here don't. So I guess we should do a quick introduction here. So Nick and I are long lost cousins. We've recently been reconnected and really got to know each other. What better way to get to know each other than hanging out in Crete for a week together? So we jammed on so many different things that I think the About Abroad audience can relate to. As we were talking, like I kept telling you this, I was like, I wish we had a microphone right here, right now, because people that I talk to through the podcast can totally relate to the situation you're in and the types of things you're thinking through. And so I think you'll have a lot to shed some light on.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, let's see. All right. So a little bit of context. You're currently back in Texas, but you've just been on how long were you in Europe?
6 weeks. We took a nice long 6-week adventure through Europe.
6 weeks, not just you. You brought a whole crew in tow.
A whole crew. Yep. My amazing partner, Alyssa, my 2 daughters and her son. He's 6 and my daughters are 12 and 14. So it was a great crew to travel with. Everyone's an awesome traveler. And we decided to take a little inspiration from you and others that have been on your podcast around trying to do slow mad a little bit. We couldn't do multiple months, but we could at least do multiple weeks. And so we spent 3 weeks in Amsterdam with the kids, and that was amazing. We got to live there, go to the grocery store, go to the parks, rented bikes, kind of live the life there. Went to work. It wasn't all vacation. It was a lot of living normal life. That was the intent.
Sweet. What'd you guys do after that? 3 weeks in Amsterdam and then.
Yeah, 3 weeks in Amsterdam, and then we spent we kind of bopped. My amazing partner spent about a week flying the kids back to America, and then came back to Europe. I commuted through Germany. We met up in Frankfurt, and then we spent a few days in Croatia. Got to see Dubrovnik, which was amazing. That was kind of vacation-y. It was very hybrid work. And then we joined you in Crete, and we spent about 10 days in Crete total.
Oh man, it was a good time. The highlight of my summer trip for sure.
Terrible summer trip. Yeah, it was a great
What I think is so cool, there's so many little things wrapped up in there that I want to get into, because this wasn't just like a 6-week trip for no reason. There's some intention behind this for a sort of a longer play here, which I think is fascinating. I also think it's really interesting that you're doing all this with kids, because I get a ton of emails from people saying like, hey, I would love to live this lifestyle, the nomad, slow mad, expat lifestyle. But I have kids, like, period. And then also like, there's a lot of people coming from the US who are actively looking to make a move to Europe. And that seems to be your goal. So, so there's a lot wrapped up in there, and I don't know, I kind of want to like leave that open to you to maybe expound upon.
Yeah, so we desperately want to live in Europe, and we've got a dynamic situation where we've both got co-parents that live here in the States, but we've been struggling to find community, and I think a lot of people are feeling this sense of isolation. And my partner Alyssa and I have been spending so much time trying to figure out how can we build a stronger sense of community for our family, for ourselves, and just thinking about the future of just being happier around more people. And we have both traveled. We both studied abroad in Europe. I studied in Greece. She studied in Hungary. And from that experience, both of us realized that there's a cultural element that's drawn us back to, weirdly enough, the homeland. We're not too many generations away from relatives that came from there, including my partner. Her grandparents were born in Hungary, and so we think there's a path towards citizenship for at least one of us, and I think I might as well. But I might have one as well. But the idea that just thinking about our kids, like I have one of them going to high school, and this is kind of the darker side of it. There's kind of a push and a pull to do this. The push is our kids can't ever go outside when they're at school. They're in lockdown every day. And, the doors are locked, and there's police officers in school to protect them every day. We don't just live in America, we live in Texas. And so there's an incredible amount of guns. We lived through, Uvalde shooting was not too far from us. And every time there's another major school shooting, they add more and more restrictions to the way the kids get to live their lives. And it seems bizarre to me to live in a world where my partner says, I drop my kid off every day at school, and there is a glimmer of a thought of like, this might be the last time I see them. And it's a wild reality to live in. And so we've really been trying to check ourselves to make sure that we're not running away from something. But when we examine it, we've been drawn towards the communal culture, the type of lifestyle that Europe brings, a large chunk of Europe brings, the lack of car dependence, the public transit, the ability to walk places, and just the sense of like getting to know your neighbors is something that we greatly, greatly desire. And I think it'll be not just great for us, but I think our kids will get to experience that and embed that in their futures as well.
And so how do you navigate the co-parenting aspect? Because like, presumably if you're going to move abroad, like, so to make sure it's clear for people, like your plan is to long-term to try to make a move abroad. But there's some hurdles to overcome for anybody trying to make that move. You've got a pretty big one there. And so is that part of the plan?
Yep. Yeah. So I think the big factor is school, right? What do we do for school? And the co-parents thing involves that. But the school thing, I think, is the first hurdle. Is like, do we take them out of school here in the US, and then how do we enroll them in school there? We don't know actually what country we might be able to get into. And so school is a bit of up in the air. We could do some degree of homeschooling or some sort of community thing. Like, we'll figure that part out. I'm far less concerned about the GPAs and far more concerned about just living a happy life. And if that means there's like a gap in school for a little bit while we figure it out, it's a thing we're willing to sacrifice. But the co-parenting part of it is an interesting factor. Both of our co-parents are interested in living abroad as well. The details of that are not sorted out. So maybe part 2 of this episode in a year or 2 from now, we'll have some clear answers, but there's a willingness and openness to want to live abroad, and a willingness and openness on their part, and a willingness and openness to figuring out some alternative and creative co-parenting. I think to that question, one of the hardest things about both my partner and I leaving our previous relationships was the fog that exists before you make that move and before you kind of make that change. And it's a big change. But it's incredible what happens when you set the intention, when you make the change, the fog sort of lifts. And one of the things we didn't know what to do before we separated was like, where are we going to live? How are we going to make it work? Like, how are they going to go to school? Like all these questions, they felt impossible. But then once we made the decision to make the change, all those things fell into place. They were like super easy questions to answer. Moving abroad and school abroad is not going to be simple, but I have all faith that we'll figure out those details, and we'll do it with kindness, respect, and consideration for our kids and for each other as co-parents and co-partners.
People don't know this about you. I do, but like, I can't help but see your work in the way that you are approaching, like you're a design thinker and you have these systems that you work through, and you've done it at some of the, most like impressive, especially for people listening here, like remote first companies, remote first environments, like IBM, Invision, Meta. And
yeah, I've been at those places, and largely my role has been a change agent and like helping other people through that. Like, well, how are we going to possibly do that? It's like, well, when we change some of the system, it enables these great outcomes to happen. Right. And so, yeah, through design thinking, through, remote work and hybrid work. And I've learned so much from you and the podcast and the guests you've had around this. And I'm imbuing some of that into my modern work today. But yeah, getting to work at places like Invision where they embraced remote work from day one, right? They never had an office. And it was really cool to see the cultures that work in that setting. And now it's funny watching so many new companies that are forced into it kind of trip over themselves to try to figure the culture out. But it's cool to bring those practices into my real life. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is totally an aside to what we were talking about, but while we're nerding on remote work, I believe like a lot of people don't know this, but Invision was kind of like the OG of remote first thinking, and one of the biggest out there in the heyday. Does that sound about correct?
Yeah, I think them and Basecamp. I mean, I was in Chicago when Basecamp started and blew up, and they were Chicago based, but they had started hiring, and they started one of the first remote work job boards back in the day. And I had always been interested in remote work. Most of my jobs from 2012 on had been some degree of hybrid. Even when I worked at IBM and no one called it hybrid, half my meetings were with people in other countries. So like it was remote. We're doing remote, just all going into an office and doing remote. And so trying to create structures so that people that are dialing in are treated as first-class citizens and everyone gets the same experience has been on my mind for over a decade now. And it was a real natural fit to move into a place like Invision that had established a lot of those practices. And I think you've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but Invision was very intentional. They spent the money they would have spent on buildings and air conditioning and rent. They spent that money on flying people and getting them together and having that intentional togetherness that didn't require some hardcore business ROI restriction. It was just like, no, we've got to get people together, and it's okay if it should happen on the regular. And like watching the people who got to be together in those moments and then come together later remotely, through video, the bond was there. The bond was 100% there. Actually, I'm at a new role now, and this company doesn't. This company is just moving into the hybrid space and is trying to figure that out. And so one of the things I'm trying to encourage is we all have to get together, right? Like onboarding as a new employee somewhere is interesting when you don't get to ever see anyone in the flesh.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, as you said, I'm a huge fan of this. It's like, give me the location independence and the remote first mindset and principles, but also understand that we're humans that are social beings and need to get together from time to time. And that really matters, even if you can't measure it. Often you can, but even if you can't, like this is one of those factors that there doesn't need to be a clear black and white positive ROI. It just is.
It's you can measure certain aspects, but it's difficult because you're asking to measure a feeling. Like it's how much do you love someone? It's like, I don't know, like an 8. It's just hard. Like you can't, there's no quantifiable metric for like how close you feel with people, and that fluidity, you can get work done when you have that built-in trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe you can't measure this, but like, is there like a 1 to 10 on a 1 to 10 scale? Like what is the extreme where do you sit on that scale in terms of like, I need to get abroad? Is it like a 3? Like, yeah, I'd like to do it. It sounds fun. Or it's like, it's a 9. This is urgent. I got to get the hell out of here and get abroad.
I'll answer you with a story. So about our trip, we spent 3 weeks in Amsterdam. We really felt like we got comfortable with that environment really quickly. We didn't have a car there. We rented a car for a day so we could take a little road trip out of town. And driving it back into Amsterdam was like, oh shit, this place is made for, this is a human scale place. This is not a car scale place. And so it was very visceral that this place was a fit for, at least the general culture was a fit for what we were looking for. We then took that extended trip around in Germany and Croatia and Greece. We had one night left back in Amsterdam on our way back. We had a single night on the way home, and we landed and we thought it'd be fun to go back to our favorite restaurant or whatever. It felt like we got home. It felt like home. It was wild. And I don't think it's just Amsterdam. I think it's, probably the broader Netherlands and just kind of the general region and, Europe as an ecosystem. But we then flew home, and it was 115 degrees in Texas. So beyond the heat, it still is. It has not. We have it's still 115. So besides that, the cultural elements, like there was a immensely visceral reverse culture shock. We still feel it on a daily basis. We've been home for a little while. And so every time we interact with the environment, it feels like we're not supposed to be here. So I'd say it's probably a 10 or 11, like, and we gotta go. We gotta figure it out.
It's boiling over.
Yeah. And life is starting to, that with that intent, we're starting to make very clear choices about housing decisions, school decisions, like everything is framed by that, which is peaceful. We don't know the answer, but we know that there's a path. And so it's definitely a driving factor. It feels really good to have that kind of mission, a shared mission.
It's so cool to hear you talk through it though, because this is, a lot of times I get people that come on the podcast that have already made the move. They've already gone through the steps that you're going through right now. And so they're kind of telling the story from their vantage point in the present. And it's tough to go back sometimes. Like even when I try to regurgitate some of the steps that we went through, it's sort of like all with this knowledge that at the end, you already know the outcome. And so, but most of the people that I talk to off the air are more closely aligned with where you are. There's this desire, there's the capability, like, hey, I've got remote work now, or I've got a path to go do this, and certainly the desire, but I'm not sure how I'm going to get from point A to point B, and potentially I'm not even sure where I'm going yet. And so this is the part that I find so fascinating, because you are design thinking it through. You're taking like very intentional steps. You've got a somewhat of an outcome already planned. And so, it's fun to think through with you.
I like how you said that. I think I hadn't really put it in the design thinking box, but just like any design, and I've been in the design field for over 20 years, a big part of it is not like thinking we know exactly where we're going to be in a project in life in 2 years. It's setting an intention and going, we think this is the general direction, but knowing that the version of ourselves today is the dumbest version we'll ever be. And like the me tomorrow knows more, and the me in a month and the me in 6 years will know a lot more. And so that version of me deserves the version of me right now not making a choice that's going to lock that person in. And so it's like, how do we commit to things while also leaving the fluidity for learning more as we go? I don't know. Do you want to talk about, kind of want to ask you about that exact thing right now, about your intention of where you're living? And
Oh,
I don't
it's
know
a
if you
great
want
question. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, yeah, there's a lot of turmoil in this space for me right now because maybe turmoil is a little bit strong, but I mean, it's not totally off base either. Like, I am unsure where I want to be, and it's not because I dislike where I am. It's because I just want, like, literally want to be in a lot of different places and feel this sort of like toggling back and forth between kind of really enjoying exploring, being nomadic again for a little while, but also recognizing that I really benefit from like having home, routine, fixed community. And I don't have the energy for I'm not enjoying the exploring as much as I once did. So you make sacrifices when you leave, quote unquote, home. Like, I lived in Valencia for 5 years almost. I left there to do this like temporary traveling around thing for a year and a half now or so. And I'm kind of finding like I enjoy it a lot, but I don't know if I enjoy it enough to justify continuing to make those sacrifices of like leaving behind friends, not having your fixed home base, routine, all those things. So I'm not sure. Like part of me. So if I was going to like put it into two boxes, there's like one box that I want to step into, which is like, let's settle down somewhere. Let's have a home. Let's kind of go back to like a more normal life, which comes with lots of benefits. I see very few downsides to that, except that I give up this like life of exploring and adventure that I'm also very called to, which comes with its own set of pros and cons.
I think it's a great, looking at that it's spot on. And one of the lenses I look at that particular problem in is, and I think I'm trying to do everything in life right now by not looking at anything as a binary. So I think we put ourselves into false choices of settle down or stay adventuring or whatever. There's a million versions of that I can talk about, which probably appropriate for other podcasts. But the idea that you can find a sense, I believe there's an ability to find a sense of home somewhere and build that community and still build in time and space to explore and feel like you still get to breathe in the life of a new place and experience that. And to that point, I think our path right now, again, without guaranteeing the future, Nick, this is what you're going to do. I think our path is to still have somewhat of a home base, a version of a home base in the US, right? I think we'll probably still own a property here. We've struggled to look through how might we buy or own something in Europe without credit there, even if we get a citizenship. Like, there's a lot of nuances in that we haven't sorted out. So the idea that we might still have a home base here, we can come back and see people that we've built really close bonds with and friends and family, but go out to Europe and live part of the year there and have another like a second home base seems most ideal for us. We love the idea of having a home base in Europe where then we can jump around and see other things and do weekend trips that, Texas is so giant that a quick trip to another town is 3.5 hours, right? And like one way. And it's basically the same strip malls that we get everywhere else in America, right? So the variety is low. So anyways.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I think you nailed it with not necessarily needing to like choose between one life and another life, right? I talk to so many people that are in this world that we're living in, and I swear, like, everybody wants the same thing. You mentioned community before, words like home base. I think that there's a lot of us that we're very excited about the idea of having location independence and being able to see a lot of different places and experience them, but not necessarily needing to like live in them or just fly through them, quick, like nomad style. We want to have that sense of community, that place where we call home, and then, go off and adventure a little bit from there, get our fix for that. So that's what I think ultimately I'm working towards. Sounds like that's what you're working towards. And I know many people, ultimately want to get there as well. Be interesting to see though, how it all lines up, because right now I'm still very much so in the slow mad phase and not sure where I'm going to go. So that story is still to be written, but I've gone through. The weird thing is, like, I've gone through this a handful of times. Like, I've toggled back and forth between very nomadic and very set, like owned a home and had a, very like kind of like standard life, and transitioned into full-time nomading, and then kind of back to like slow mad life, and then living abroad as an expat. And so, you have done the ebb and flow through this before. And this, I will say, this time is a bit weird because I do sort of feel like I'm standing in two different worlds and not sure what the right outcome is. In the past, it was very clear, as like, I'm working towards being a full-time nomad, or I'm working towards like settling back down in one place. Like, I don't want to move around anymore. So a little more gray area this time around.
Like I think we get trapped in the, not just the binary. I think we also get trapped in the, we're making a decision for the rest of our lives. Right. And like the concept of, my partner and I, we shudder whenever we hear this, like the idea of like a forever home. Like I'm 29 or 32 and I bought my forever home, and it's like, you're going to die there. Like that's the only place you'll ever call. It just feels like, it feels insane to us to think that way. And so the idea that you can realize that like you need that sense of community, you want to build that sense of like home base and home, that feels right to you, and go do it. Like settle for a little bit, but know that in 2 years you might go, you know what? We built this thing. Like I want to come back here for 6 or 8 months of the year, but I'm going to spend 3 months in other places or whatever. Like, you can always change that. It's about trying to make decisions that don't lock you in permanently or make the cost of change too high. Right. Is I think the way we're trying to approach it.
That's great. So, okay. So I want to circle back on something real quick. Couple things actually. So one, you've mentioned Amsterdam. I'm assuming Amsterdam is a place on the proverbial list that you guys are considering moving to. Maybe the Netherlands as a whole. Clarify that for me real quick. And then, are there any other places that are sort of like on the radar for you?
Yeah. Definitely Netherlands as a whole. We only spent time in Amsterdam this trip. We definitely need to come back when it's not 80 degrees and beautiful, and experience the country in a different climate, just to make sure it's how we feel. We grew up in Boston and Chicago respectively, so we're used to that weather. And I know the Netherlands never gets anywhere near like a Chicago winter, but it'd be good to experience we had literally sunny for 3 weeks straight in Amsterdam, which is insane. We barely saw any rain. So we need to experience it in that like real world context, and then try out other cities. Other parts in Europe, very open to, heard amazing things about Portugal, places like the surrounding areas around Barcelona. We just don't know. We're big believers in like, you got to feel the vibe. Like we got to feel what the community is like. We got to see what the customs are, and see how we fit in. We love adapting and adopting new ways of doing stuff. And so I think the intent is that you have to spend more than a few days. You've got to like be in it. You have to go to the grocery store. You got to cook meals and see the same people on the corner multiple times in a week to really feel that. And so I don't even think 3 weeks is enough. But Lisbon maybe Porto and I think Barcelona are top on the list to check out. So maybe next summer we'll do another 6 or 8 weeks and go between those two or something.
That's cool. And then the idea is in a couple, within like maybe 2-3 years, you actually make the move. So you're scouting this out over a few year period, giving yourself, this is what I want to pull out for people, because I think this is really kind of, it is a bit different, and I think it's the right approach. But I think a lot of people have this like one place in mind that they're going to go. They figured it out because it's the visa that works for them, or it's the place that they traveled to one time and they loved, or whatever. And then they also kind of have like a fixed deadline. Like, I'm going to do it by this time. I kind of love how you guys are leaving some room for ambiguity. And also, like, as you said, like the future version of me is smarter than the version of me today. So you're going to learn as you go and make that decision in due time.
Yeah, exactly. So just to flesh that out, we know that we may have to enter into Europe in a situation that doesn't land us in the place that we think is our perfect spot. And so we're very willing to, if it's a nomad visa or something as our best route in, God, it'd be terrible to live in Italy for a year or something. Like those things are great. We'll happily do that, knowing that this is a step in the direction of getting residency if we can't do the citizenship path. And and yes, spending adequate amount of time in different seasons in multiple places so that we can understand what's going to feel right to us. And there's a million. I'm very aware we're in the unknown. There are unknowns about places that we don't even know we need to factor in, right? Whether it's taxes or, I think you and I've talked about this, like the Spanish culture of a kind of always being late, or not late, but like that's their version of on time.
No, late is right.
Later, okay, later's right. I think it would be a tough cultural transition, but I also don't know until we do it, and maybe we can adapt to it. And like maybe it's just deconstructing the American like go go go, got to hustle, got to get things done, got to be on time. Maybe that's just a learned thing that once I let it go, I'll siesta all the time and it'll feel great. Like I have made those kind of life shifts before, but you've got to embrace it and push through the discomfort and see if it grows on you. And if it doesn't, then, we can try somewhere else. That's a cool thing about Europe is you can pretty much switch cultures in a couple hours or less versus a place like America. There ain't much of a difference between, like, we'd like to pretend here in Texas that we're a whole lot different, but like, it's pretty much the same as most of the states.
Yeah, that's one of the things that always called me to Europe. From like, I also did my like study abroad here, and was just fascinated by that. And I remember actually like returning from the study abroad experience, which was my first real like lengthy, several months outside of my home country thing, and also having that reverse culture shock. And the thing that I missed the most a month after returning or whatever, was like that ability to cross into another country so easily. Like what I strategically picked Austria. I studied in Austria because I wanted to be able to take a train and go in any one of multiple directions and be in a new country and hear a new language and eat new food. And so like, within a 2.5 hour train ride, I think it could be in 5 countries. And so that was just like super cool to me. And I returned to the US, and the first thing that hit me actually was the architecture. I remember thinking like, man, I miss the old cobblestone streets and the row houses and stuff like that. Like that was literally on the way home from the airport. My dad and I were having a conversation. He's like, what do you miss? And I was like, I miss that architecture already. But then a month later, 2 months later, that's what I kept coming back to. It's like, God, I really loved like suddenly crossing into Italy and hearing Italian, or going into Hungary and hearing Hungarian. Like that was really cool. It made the mundane really exciting. And
absolutely.
So yeah, that
can
doesn't
I add
get
on
old.
to that? I grew up I remember a very early memory when I was in my, I think, middle school. I think I insulted my mom at the time. We were driving down, we lived in Northern Illinois, like north of Chicago. And it's just, they plow down cornfields and put up, the identical neighborhoods over and over and over again. And the suburbs just blend into each other. And we lived in one of those suburbs, right? And they had built a new subdivision, and I watched it get built. And one day we're driving down the street and I look at the houses and I go, why would anyone want to live here? They're all exactly the same. Like I was just like shitting on it. Right. And my mom, and rightfully so, was like upset. Like, people work really hard to have this life. And like, this is a dream for a lot of people. And, a 9-year-old me didn't really understand that. But that sentiment holds true, where it wasn't until the last couple of years, and I have to make a shout out to another creator, the channel Not Just Bikes, great podcast and great YouTube channel, really put the language around this that I didn't understand about how suburbia, the physical space design of America, impacts our culture in such an incredible way. And like, just reflecting on my girls being raised, where I used to, our suburbs were, I guess, were a little bit more dense, but like we would just run out on our bikes all day long, right? And play with friends. And now my girls, I've spent their entire lives, every social engagement, everything that's not something in our yard, we have to drive them to, or had to until we moved recently. And so the idea that they're so dependent on us, and they've already been programmed to be dependent on cars to do everything, feels like a toxin. And going to somewhere like Amsterdam or Netherlands and seeing how, and Not Just Bikes, the guy is from Toronto, who has the same kind of makeup as the Chicagoland area from a architecture standpoint, and now lives in Amsterdam. He moved his family over there, and he just breaks down the little nuances of the public space design and transportation design, how it impacts us as from a health standpoint, from a culture standpoint, a mental health standpoint. And then now having that in my head and then living in Amsterdam for 3 weeks and feeling it, like viscerally feeling that space design, and how it impacted us and the number of steps and bike miles. And my whole body felt better because I was moving instead of standing for 10 seconds to get into a car, to sit, to stand for 10 seconds, to sit down in another chair. Really has a huge impact on us and cemented that this is the right, the politics, and not beyond the politics of left and right and all that, but like there seems to be a shared sense of like, let's take care of everybody more so than I feel we get in America. And I think that's number one of the big draws. And we visited you in Crete, and there's some very small, like old towns there, right? Like we're in Hanya and Heraclion. Both of those cities are like ancient cities, right? Small streets, old town, blah, blah, blah. There's hardly a bike to be found. It's all cars. And I was so blown away by that, of like the walking through cars lined up in mufflers and stuff like that, and like trying to walk through it and feeling like a second class citizen again. I was like, wow, this place would be ripe for, transportation updates to have bikes and but better public transit and all that. And those little nuances are things that we need to explore in every new place. Because if you look at it on paper or you look at pictures on it, whatever, you probably won't pick up on those details. So,
We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you in partnership with my friends over at Kona. Those of you that have been listening to the show for a long time know that I am a huge fan of the remote work movement. However, I also recognize it comes with some challenges. One of those challenges that plagues many remote teams is employee burnout or employee dissatisfaction with their jobs. This is really hard to monitor as a leader when your teammates are not sitting face to face with you in an office anymore. But that's what Kona was built to tackle, and they've done a phenomenal job. The co-founders over there are friends and people who have truly built something to help people and help remote workers more specifically. So I love what they're doing. It makes a huge impact for their customers, and I'm excited to partner with them here. You can find out more and get 15% off your team subscription by going to the link in the show notes and using the code CHASE at checkout. Feel free to ask me any questions. I highly recommend this product and am excited to hear what the About Abroad community thinks. Check out the link in the show notes and use the code CHASE at checkout to get 15% off your subscription. If you've made it this far into the episode and you're still enjoying yourself, then I would love to ask a quick favor. Open up the app that you're using to listen to this podcast and leave a quick review. You can do this in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and really just about any platform that allows podcast listening now. If you can't find that in the interface of the app, then scroll down in the show notes and find ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, and you should be able to leave it from there. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. So one thing that people probably don't know if you've never been there is Valencia, Spain, where I've been living for the last several years, is one of the most bike-friendly cities probably in Southern Europe. Amazing network of bike paths that go all through the city. You do not need a car. You ride your bike everywhere, and they're like very nicely dedicated bike paths going in both directions. People follow the rules. There's bike stoplights. You can get anywhere across the entire city. All by bike. So I got completely used to like never needing a car, biking everywhere or walking everywhere. And it's like a big enough city where there's a lot going on, but it's a small enough city where you can get by with just a bike. So I've become totally used to that. So anyway, I've been traveling for the last year and a half or so and experiencing different places. And I mean, I grew up in a place where we drove everywhere. So you'd think that would be ingrained in me, but just that fairly short period, of handful of years in Valencia has made me totally dependent on a bike. Like I do not ever want to live somewhere where I have to drive. And that is actually, yeah, as you said, like that's currently the thing here in Crete that I'm finding is you have to use a car everywhere, and it's driving me crazy. And I'm like, I don't want to. It's 10 minutes, 15 minutes by bike, but there's not a way to get there by bike. So anyway. It's funny how you can change though, like that.
Got a follow-up question on a topic from earlier. What is the thoughts around like making something like Valencia kind of a home base? You've lived there. I'm sure you thought about it a lot. So I don't think I ever asked you that.
Yeah. I mean, I love Valencia in Spain and would be happy to go back. As you know, there are push pull factors in relationships where you have to appease both sides of the coin. So trying to figure that out. Like we're trying to find, to be like completely candid. My wife and I want different things right now, and so we're trying to figure out how to make those things work together.
Yeah. That's an important navigation to do. Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's fun too. It's not like a contentious thing. It's more like an exciting thing. It's like there's a lot of cool places, and we're fortunate that we've just been given like EU permanent residency. We also always have the option to go back to the US or explore other places where, we've worked hard to like have location independence for a reason. The slight downside, it's very slight, but there is like the paradox of choice thing where you end up analyzing all your options and you're just kind of like, well, which one's the right one? And
you got the cheesecake menu of places to live.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
The Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. So that's a thing. So we're just trying to like navigate that and, and figure out like what's the right place. There's lots of factors though, like same sort of things you're thinking through. Like, language is a thing. There's some languages that I really am like, we're both like really eager to learn. Others we're not. Other places where language barrier is a thing, and some places where it's not. Of course, like weather, city size, cost of living, all those things. So we're just starting to go through that process. I think we'll figure it out.
It's interesting. I asked some folks in different parts of Europe as we traveled, and my partner, I feel like I'm pretty outgoing. My partner is phenomenal in any public setting. He can make friends with everybody. So we got to meet a lot of locals and have a lot of good conversations while traveling. And one of the things that came up a few times is like asking people. We met this like amazing German, actually in Crete, and we were asking about, have you always lived in Germany? And oh yeah, and you have the ability to go anywhere, right? Like anywhere in Europe? Yeah, we can go anywhere. Why not go? And they're like, that's my home. Like that's where I want to be. Like they know other places have things that they might like better or might work better, but that draw, those roots, like the way just the general society works, makes people feel like where I grew up is home. And there seems to be a much stronger draw in the locals being like, I was born here, my family's here, my community's here. I can go visit and do stuff in other places for short or long periods of time, but this is home. And I think maybe a lot of what I'm feeling, and maybe folks that are listening to this are feeling, of like, we're missing that sense of community in America. The goal of like moving to a new part of the country, getting a job, uprooting, trying to make like a chosen family network, can feel fleeting. And then success looks like isolation in a giant home in the suburbs. And like the white picket fence man is a trap. It's a trap. So I found that fascinating. Over and over and over again, people in Europe would say, no, I just love, that's my home. That's where I want to be.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. So I was I was just recently in Ireland for a work thing, and I had a night there before the event took place. So I just was in Galway, which is one of my favorite places in the world. You love that, but you love it too. I know we talked about it. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. Small, fun, lively, prototypical Ireland. If anybody's listening has never been there, but I met this German couple, just amazing, like in their late 50s, early 60s, that owned a VW bus, and they lived in northern Germany, in Bremen, Germany. And every summer they did like a 2-month trip together in their VW somewhere in Europe, and they switched back and forth. Actually, like super cute. They each own their own like retro VW, and they met because he saw her VW and was like, "Hey, you have a cool VW." They ended up both being like, divorced and like looking for a new partner. So their VW buses brought them together. They each individually swear that their VW is the cooler of the two. They're both awesome. Anyway, every summer they switch back and forth, and they do a trip in one or the other, and the other one gets to pick where they're going. So this year, the guy was a music junkie. They took her VW to Galway, Ireland to listen to music and hang out and all this stuff. Long way of saying, they love Bremen, Germany. Like they've seen the world. They've both traveled a ton in their lives. They travel every summer for a couple months at a time. They've seen a lot, and they choose to call Bremen, Germany home, which, probably most people listening don't know much or anything about. And they would say it's not the most spectacular place. It's not, it's whatever, but it's home, and they love it there, and they don't feel called to go live anywhere else. They're just, that's their home. That's their community. That's where they raised kids, and they're very happy with that.
Yep.
And so
I brought that up because of our discussion about you thinking about where you're going to go next and kind of try to find a place of home, a sense of home. I'm trying to tell myself the same thing of like, nowhere we go is going to check every box on that list of subjective things and, or objective list of things. And I think part of it is weirdly counter to my earlier statement, like just committing to saying, I'm going to try to stay somewhere and build community, but you have to give it enough time, right? You've got to give it time. And it's not a weeks, it's not a months, it's probably a year's thing to really find those people. And like I spent the last 3 Christmases with this really wonderful family. Like that's community, like the same, like finding those traditions. And when you move from place to place, trying to seek that extra checkbox or the little bit better weather or whatever, you don't get those 3 or 4 Christmases in a row with the same people. So, that's in my mind about where we land, and where we land, I hope I can build that with the people in the area, and then also have the freedom to take my VW bus with my partner and travel for a couple months.
It all sounds really awesome when we start speaking it into existence. One thing we haven't touched on that you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to make sure we circled back to it, is like there is the big question of like how, right? Like visas and bureaucracy are a thing. Unfortunately, we can't just like pick up and go and live wherever we want. So you mentioned something about like a pathway through Hungary. And you sort of alluded to something that you might have an opportunity as well. So I wondered if you could touch on this space.
Yeah, I'd say there's plan A and plan B. Plan A is both of us get EU citizenship through our lineage. I've got a great grandfather from Italy, which I believe in Italy they still honor. I've done a decent amount of research, but I'm not too far down that path. We're both looking to hire some sort of service to help us navigate that. So I believe that's a couple-year long process. My partner's grandparents were born directly in Hungary, so she's one step away. I mean, it's like a shoe-in. They do honor, that, and so it's more about just going through the paperwork and finding the documents and whatnot. That seems fairly viable. Plan B is, and I hope to take advantage of this if we need to. There just seems to be a lot of work visa or like nomad visa type of things. So both of our current roles aren't fully internationally remote. So there's some challenge there, and maybe some growth to figure out how we can work 100% remote and anywhere in the world. But that's almost an easier problem. I think we could find a role and make sacrifice, even if we made less money. Making that work would be great. So I've talked to you a lot about there's potential visas and nomad visas in Italy and Greece, and I think there might be one in Germany you mentioned. So that's definitely a plan B we got to do more research on. But if that means we go for a year and live in Germany or Italy and figure out the rest of it, we totally will, because that's, I think, the path you kind of took, right?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, I would agree with you. There's so many, we'll just call them digital nomad visas, remote work visas, like pensioner visas. They're, all designed to provide access if you can prove that you have an income coming from somewhere else. And so it seems like just about every country in Europe now has a path.
I'm very much counter to any concept around trickle-down economics. So I say that as a caveat to my next statement, because it might sound like it. I'm curious if the money that's coming in is bolstering the local economy, and that enables locals to now start making more money. Like there's more money in the system, right? And if they tax it appropriately and do their fairly, and from my eyes, fairly amazing social programs, like can that help all ships rise? So instead of like in America where they knock down $150,000 bungalow and put up $1 million home, and one single family can live there, are there programs where maybe they're renovating areas, but with conscious like humanism built into it. And so the money can come in. So yeah, rent prices going up is a huge challenge, but the solution isn't stop the money flow. I don't think as the only solution. There's probably other creative ways to embrace that growth and enable it so that not everything is about how much. You shouldn't need lots of money for a ticket to enter or to continue to live somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it'd be, I mean, I'm kind of fascinated to see how it works. I understand the pressure that you feel to like make sure you get in while the doors are still open. But I think they will continue to be. And I think this is like very, it's like a very fluid situation country to country. So, and many of them are just getting started in this path and have like a lot of room to grow. Portugal's been doing what they've been doing for years. And so everyone else is just kind of like latching on to that now.
gotcha. That's cool.
On the coming back real quick to the Hungary, Italy thing. So I just want to like, for anybody that's unfamiliar with this, I think this is really fascinating. We've never talked about either of these. Well, we have touched on the Italy thing before, but we have never touched on the Hungary thing. So like essentially there is a potential path for people who have lineage going back to Hungary, a direct line to Hungary or a direct line to Italy. These are just two examples where you, even though you weren't born there, but say your grandparents were, you can get a passport, which is kind of like a wild thing. But this is a real thing. And now imagine that if you get, I know plenty of people, particularly a lot of like people from Latin America, have some like Argentine friends who have Italian passports and they live in Spain, for example, or they live in Germany, but they're able to be in the European Union because they have that Italian passport. So this is like a big opportunity for a lot of people. If you can track your lineage back to, for example, Hungary or Italy, you may have an opportunity to enter.
Both, there's a lot of caveats to this, but the umbrella statement here is both Hungary and Italy have it's called citizenship by descent, right? Is the term, and they both have no limitations on a specific number of generations. If you can prove through paper that's 10 generations back, you can get citizenship. Now, here's a complication, especially with places like Hungary or even Italy. Their governments aren't 500 years old, and especially the Hungarian area has gone through a lot. And so like, that area's changed governments quite a lot. So your grandparents, your lineage might be Hungarian, but they actually might be Czech, right? Or it might be, some other variation of that. So figuring that out is definitely a complication, but the fact that they don't block you, they're not like 2 generations and you can come. It's like unlimited number of generations. So go dig up that family seal in your grandparents' attic and bring it out. But that's pretty cool.
I mean, like, do you have any idea what are they looking for? Like a birth certificate, or like how would I'm trying to, it sounds simple on the surface, like, oh yeah, I have Italian descent, but like, how do you prove it?
There's a lot of sites for it and there's services for it, but they basically do like a really thorough search on gathering like vital records and showing name lineage through, like getting not just your birth certificate, but birth certificates and marriage certificates and any permanent documents that are government issued. They've got to have that name that tracks back. Unfortunately, computers are pretty new. Yeah. So for Hungarian citizenship, it's funny because I'm not even the Hungarian side of this, but I've been reading up on it, and it's actually almost identical for the Italian side of it. But it's like you've got to find birth certificates and marriage certificates and Hungarian passports and those kind of things. So everything I've read is it's a couple year long process, and it can be anywhere between a couple thousand. I saw one service for the Italian one was like 20 grand. I'm like, I'm going to figure something else out. So it seems to be like find a reputable service, find friends and other family that maybe have done it. But it seems, for us European descent Americans, it seems like there's several paths. And then once you're in the EU door, you're now in EU. So it's incredible. Like that feels like such a great path, and you're permanent. It's not like contingent on other things. So that feels like almost too good to be true, but I've heard of people doing it and it seems to be legitimate.
I will, we'll drop a link in the show notes to a previous episode that we did with a guy named Anthony who did this through Italy. And he shared a bunch of information on this. Generally, what I find is that with the citizen by descent, I mean, I'm no expert at all, but what I've generally seen is that country to country, this tends to be very, very similar process. Like they're looking for similar things. So anyway, if you're interested in this, want to learn a little bit more, we do have an episode that could be interesting to listen to, particularly if you're interested in going to Italy.
Quick follow up on a big reason why we want to do this is higher education and the quality of education. My partner was in education for a long time. We both have a pretty less than ideal view of the education systems that we currently send our kids through in the collective we in the United States. And there seems to be more and more both publicly available and also expat available programs for higher education. Maybe we can put it in the show notes. I've done some research in the past, but I think Iceland and Norway and a couple others have schools, universities that are run via the country that are free for expats. And so the idea of leaving the US to go get higher education seems inverted from the last 100 years where everyone's coming to the US for education. But being in the profession that I'm in. So yeah, we're looking for education opportunities for our kids. We've got 4 years until my first is ready for higher education. I hope she studies and wants to travel abroad as part of her broader education. I'm a big believer in those experiences are more important than GPA. And so, and as somebody who's been fortunate enough to be in an industry where I get to hire folks and a hiring manager, when I look at people's resumes and I look at their experience, I honestly don't care what their grades were, and I almost don't even care what their degree was. And sometimes I actually prefer when people haven't gone to a university because they've got more real world experience. They're better at sending an email than a lot of people who have spent 4 years in college. And so I think I want to support my girls in any path they want to go in. And but I'm also very disinterested in paying into a highly profit-driven education system that we have in America. So that's a huge driving factor over the next, I think 4 years is our absolute deadline, but we'd like to make a move sooner than that.
Very cool. Good point to point out. I think another thing there is just the cost. People, I talked to someone the other day who's getting a master's degree in MBA here at a reputable university for 600 euros a semester. So you're easily looking at more 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000, depending on where you go in the US. So it's a massive difference.
I paid off my college loans during COVID.
And you're old, so
I'm old. You can't see me, but I got plenty of grades, and it's that leaves a definite driver in my mind for 2 kids. I don't want them to be saddled with that, and it's important.
Very cool, man. Well, you shared a lot here, and I appreciate you being honest and transparent, just kind of sharing what's going through your head, because whether people can relate to it or not, I imagine many can, but I think it sheds some light on what people are going through as they're starting this process, and hopefully gives people some pause, some questions to ask, some potential answers to those questions. So this is fun, man. Great to see you again, and appreciate the transparency.
For sure. Thanks for the delightful conversation as always, and thanks for inviting me on. It's been fun.
Yeah, definitely. We will place some links to some places where people can contact you or follow along. Are there any particular places people should go if they want to connect with you?
If you're really a geek about design systems, I'm always happy to chat about that. I do, beyond my day job, I do workshops and run all kinds of facilitation around helping teams build out their future of their design system. So you can check out my website, nickhahn.com, and get hold of me there. But honestly, you just want to grab a beer and talk about work or life or Europe, I'm happy to do that too.
Awesome. All right. Those links will be in the show notes. Thank you, Nick. Good to see you. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.